we all consulted together in a friendly way about what Armadale was to do. He was fool enough, at the outset, to protest against submitting to Major Milroy's conditions. He declared, with his odious red face looking the picture of brute health, that he should never survive a 6 months' separation from his beloved Neelie. Midwinter, as may easily be imagined, seemed a little ashamed of him, and joined me in bringing him to his senses. We showed him, what would have been plain enough to anybody but a booby, that there was no honorable or even decent alternative left but to follow the example of submission set by the young lady. "Wait, and you will have her for your wife," was what I said. "Wait, and you will force the major to alter his unjust opinion of you," was what Midwinter added. With two clever people hammering common sense into his head at that rate, it is needless to say that his head gave way, and he submitted. Having decided him to accept the major's conditions, I was careful to warn him before he wrote to Miss Milroy that my engagement to Midwinter was to be kept as strictly secret from her as from everybody else. The next question we had to settle related to his future proceedings. I was ready with the necessary arguments to stop him, if he had proposed returning to Thorpe Ambrose. But he proposed nothing of the sort. On the contrary, he declared, of his own accord, that nothing would induce him to go back. The place and the people were associated with everything that was hateful to him. There would be no Miss Milroy now to meet him in the park, and no Midwinter to keep him company in the solitary house. "I'd rather break stones on the road," was the sensible and cheerful way in which he put it, "than go back to Thorpe Ambrose." The first suggestion after this came from Midwinter. The sly old clergyman who gave Mrs. Oldershaw and me so much trouble has, it seems, been ill, but has been latterly reported better. "Why not go to Somersetshire," said Midwinter, "and see your good friend, and my good friend, Mr. Brock?" Armadale caught at the proposal readily enough. He longed, in the first place, to see dear old Brock, and he longed, in the second place, to see his yacht. After staying a few days more in London with Midwinter, he would gladly go to Somersetshire. But what after that? Seeing my opportunity, I came to the rescue this time. "You have got a yacht, Mr. Armadale," I said, "and you know that Midwinter is going to Italy. When you are tired of Somersetshire, why not make a voyage to the Mediterranean, and meet your friend and your friend's wife at Naples?" I made the allusion to his friend's wife with the most becoming modesty and confusion. Armadale was enchanted. I had hit on the best of all ways of occupying the weary time. He started up, and wrung my hand in quite an ecstasy of gratitude. How I do hate people who can only express their feelings by hurting other people's hands! Midwinter was as pleased with my proposal as Armadale, but he saw difficulties in the way of carrying it out. He considered the yacht too small for a cruise to the Mediterranean, and he thought it desirable to hire a larger vessel. His friend thought otherwise. I left them arguing the question. It was quite enough for me to have made sure, in the first place, that Armadale will not return to Thorpe Ambrose, and to have decided him, in the second place, on going abroad. He may go how he likes. I should prefer the small yacht myself, for there seems to be a chance that the small yacht might do me the inestimable service of drowning him. 5 o'clock. The excitement of feeling that I had got Armadale's future movements completely under my own control made me so restless, when I returned to my lodgings, that I was obliged to go out again and do something. A new interest to occupy me being what I wanted, I went to Pimlico to have it out with Mother Oldershaw. I walked, and made up my mind, on the way, that I would begin by quarreling with her. One of my notes of hand being paid already, and Midwinter being willing to pay the other two when they fall due, my present position with the old wretch is as independent a one as I could desire. I always get the better of her when it comes to a downright battle between us, and find her wonderfully civil and obliging the moment I have made her feel that mine is the strongest will of the two. In my present situation, she might be of use to me in various ways, if I could secure her assistance without trusting her with secrets which I am now more than ever determined to keep to myself. That was my idea as I walked to Pimlico. Upsetting Mother Oldershaw's nerves, in the first place, and then twisting her round my little finger, in the second, promised me, as I thought, an interesting occupation for the rest of the afternoon. When I got to Pimlico, a surprise was in store for me. The house was shut up, not only on Mrs. Oldershaw's side, but on Dr. Downward's as well. A padlock was on the shop door, and a man was hanging about on the watch, who might have been an ordinary idler certainly, but who looked, to my mind, like a policeman in disguise. Knowing the risks the doctor runs in his particular form of practice, I suspected at once that something serious had happened, and that even cunning Mrs. Oldershaw was compromised this time. Without stopping or making any inquiry, therefore, I called the first cab that passed me, and drove to the post office to which I had desired my letters to be forwarded, if any came for me after I left my Thorpe Ambrose lodging. On inquiry a letter was produced for Miss Gwilt. It was Mother Oldershaw's handwriting, and it told me, as I had supposed, that the doctor had got into a serious difficulty, that she was herself most unfortunately mixed up in the matter, and that they were both in hiding for the present. The letter ended with some sufficiently venomous sentences about my conduct at Thorpe Ambrose, and with a warning that I have not heard the last of Mrs. Oldershaw yet. It relieved me to find her writing in this way, for she would have been civil and cringing if she had had any suspicion of what I have really got in view. I burned the letter as soon as the candles came up; and there, for the present, is an end of the connection between Mother Jezebel and me. I must do all my own dirty work now; and I shall be all the safer, perhaps, for trusting nobody's hands to do it but my own. July 31st. More useful information for me. I met Midwinter again in the park, on the pretext that my reputation might suffer if he called too often at my lodgings, and heard the last news of Armadale since I left the hotel yesterday. After he had written to Miss Milroy, Midwinter took the opportunity of speaking to him about the necessary business arrangements during his absence from the great house. It was decided that the servants should be put on board wages, and that Mr. Bashwood should be left in charge. Somehow I don't like this reappearance of Mr. Bashwood in connection with my present interests, but there is no help for it. The next question, the question of money, was settled at once by Mr. Armadale himself. All his available ready money, a large sum, is to be lodged by Mr. Bashwood in Coutts Bank, and to be there deposited in Armadale's name. This, he said, would save him the worry of any further letter writing to his steward, and would enable him to get what he wanted, when he went abroad, at a moment's notice. The plan thus proposed, being certainly the simplest and the safest, was adopted with Midwinter's full concurrence; and here the business discussion would have ended, if the everlasting Mr. Bashwood had not turned up again in the conversation, and prolonged it in an entirely new direction. On reflection, it seems to have struck Midwinter that the whole responsibility at Thorpe Ambrose ought not to rest on Mr. Bashwood's shoulders. Without in the least distrusting him, Midwinter felt, nevertheless, that he ought to have somebody set over him to apply to in case of emergency. Armadale made no objection to this; he only asked, in his helpless way, who the person was to be. The answer was not an easy one to arrive at. Either of the two solicitors at Thorpe Ambrose might have been employed, but Armadale was on bad terms with both of them. Any reconciliation with such a bitter enemy as the elder lawyer, Mr. Darch, was out of the question; and reinstating Mr. Pedgift in his former position, implied a tacit sanction on Armadale's part of the lawyer's abominable